So now I've got the zipper assembly all glued in place. Nothing went unexpectedly as I was doing that. So that was good. And now we're ready to first dry fit the side support pieces, and then we will attach them. So what I have, the pieces I'll need now are my two completed side support pieces. To remind you, those are three pieces of chipboard glued together, and they have paper on both the back and the front. And then we need some washers and our knobs that will go on the end, a ruler, and some pieces of chipboard that we will use to help support at the base. I have 4 pieces here. So let's get started. So the first thing to do is to measure to see how far apart the dowel should be in the middle by checking a few of the measurements. I like to check at the far supports. So I'm going to measure up here just a little bit under 3.5, and then I'm going to come down to this far support and measure again, and again it's a little bit under 3.5, and when I say a little bit, that's like a 32nd, which is half of a 16th. So I want to make sure that here in the middle, the 1/4 inch dowel is that same width apart in between these two places, and right now it's at 3 3/8. So I'm just going to pull this apart a little bit until I get that measurement that I want, just a little bit more. That is good. So now we have the width, we know how wide we need the dowel to be, or how long in between the pieces. We want to add 2 washers on either side. And then put our sides, our support pieces on. And now we want to get a measurement in between the 2 support pieces. This will help us know how big to cut the foam core for the base. And I know the base is off camera right now, but we don't need that yet. So just going to put my ruler up here on top, lay this on top, and see what I have. And that looks like 4 7/8. 4 7/8. So I'm going to make a note of that because I like to forget. 4 7/8 is for the width of the foam core at the bottom. So now to see how long we want to cut the dowel. Remember, it's just dry fit in there at this point. So the length is determined by how deep the dowel goes into your knobs, and then also if you want to add another washer here on the outside. So I'm adding a washer, and I know that I need about 1/4 inch inside of my knob. So if I put a washer on each side and then take my pencil and measure out 1/4 inch on each side, and just, I have kind of a calibrated eyeball. I know where 1/4 inch is, so I'm just making tick marks on each side, and you can also, of course, draw a line right next to the washer and then measure if you want to be a little more accurate about that. So I've got these 2 tick marks measured, so I'll be able to cut my dowel off. And I've measured for the chipboard. So let's stand this up and, the foam core. Let's stand this up and see how many foam core steps we have room for. So I'm just standing this whole assembly up, and I'm holding on to it because it's a little wobbly at this point. Now, I want one of the outside the cauldron. I know it's a little hard to see. Let's see here if I tip it a little on the side. So this bottom cauldron, right now it looks like it's about an inch or so from the bottom. So what I want to do is take, I have a stack of 3 pieces of foam core board here, and I just want to stick that underneath it. Make sure that it can clear three pieces, and it has no problem. Now, the more pieces of foam core that we can put underneath there to give support to the sides, the better it will be. So let me see if I stick a 4th piece under here, if it can still clear. And it does. So I know I can have at least 4 steps. And let me see if I put another, I just have a little wedge of foam core here. Maybe see if I put so now I have a layer of 5 coming in here. What happens? So it could possibly take 5. I can see, but it's getting really close. So I think probably 4 thicknesses of foam core will be best. So I'm going to now glue. Remember, this is all dry fit up here at this point. I'm going to glue the wheels to the dowel. Want to make sure that I don't get extra glue on there so it interferes with the washers. I'm going to glue the wheels on, well, I'll cut the dowel to length, glue the wheels onto the dowel, do this assembly that I've got here, making sure that no glue gets anywhere near the the tall support pieces, put on my washer and glue my knobs on. And I should say, when you're trying to determine the knobs, this is similar to what Laura talks about when she's making the Ferris wheel. They need to be snug against there so that you don't have a lot of wobble in there, but not so tight that it can't turn. So you'll have to experiment a little bit depending on the size of your knobs. And then I'm going to cut 4 pieces of foam core for the steps and cover them with paper, and then I'll be back so we can put it together. So now we're ready to attach the whole system to the base, and in preparation for that I glued my steps. I assembled my steps together and weighted them down with a brick and let them dry thoroughly on the wood base. So you can see that I have the steps oriented this way, and the reason I did that was when I was testing the support tower, I thought that it might have a little bit too much wobble back and forth. So by orienting it this way as opposed to going the lengthwise of this, I have some room to put some buttresses up if it turns out that it needs them, and I'll show you that in a minute. So here I've got the steps. They're very firmly attached to the base that you can see. In the previous step I figured out that I could have 4 steps, so that's what I have here. And now the tower assembly, what I've done, I like to think about how I'm going to clamp something in place before I actually start gluing. So what I've done here, there's a spare piece of foam core just sitting in the mid, bracing these two pieces apart, and it's wider than it's going to be. It's about 5.5 inches wide, and then I put about 3 rubber bands on here, and all of that is higher than the 1 inch that the foam core steps are. So that my theory is that I'll put the glue on the step assembly, then I can lower this into place, and I know you can't see it, but there's a gap. Let me see if I can show it this way a little bit. Yeah, you can see there's a gap in between there. So what I'll do is once I get the glue on and things in place, then I'll pull the piece of foam core out of there, and everything should be ready to snap into place there. So let's put some glue on and try this out. So again, I'm using my extra strong glue, and that's what I used when I put the steps on the base. I'm just going to tilt this up. Now I'm just putting glue in between, coming down from the top step, because the tower doesn't extend out all the way that the steps do. And now flip it over and put glue on this side as well. Remember, I like to let that set up about 30 seconds or so. By the time I get myself ready and to put this tower on, the 30 seconds should be up. I'm checking in. I also want to get out a ruler to help make sure I'm keeping things straight. The towers aren't perfectly, the supports aren't perfectly plumb, but they're sufficient. So I'm just slipping this down in place, lining it up kind of with that top step, and now I'm going to ease out this piece of foam core, and now everything is in place, and I don't have to fiddle with trying to get the rubber bands on at this point because they're already on. And now I'll just kind of ease them around the steps here. Once I get this eased around, I'll turn the camera angle so hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. Just kind of putting them on. Actually, I'm going to keep this top one up here because it seems to need something more there. And now I'm just bringing a ruler in on the sides. See if I can. I'm going to bring a second ruler in on this side. Keep this kind of plumb and let that, and hold it that way probably for a couple minutes, just so that I make sure that everything is in place. But before I do that, let me show you what's happening down here at the base if I can. Oops, sorry, trying to figure out the best way to get in the camera. There we go. So I have it on both sides, and I have the rubber bands kind of holding it in place. So now I'm just going to put my rulers up there, stay with it, make sure that it's flat against the base. I should have put, I'm probably going to pull this up quickly and put some glue right underneath the two supports, and then let this thoroughly dry, probably for at least an hour or so with this glue. before I go on to the next step. Well, you can see that I've got the base braced up by some bricks and drying here, and I thought while it is drying, I can experiment with what I want to fill the cauldrons with and how it works with the ghosts, etc. So I've got my ghosts, and then I've got this, I think the store I got it from calls it twinkle trim in some fall colors. And so my idea is to just take some of that and stuff it in the cauldron and cut the ghosts down to size. Now, I'm not sure I can see, remember how sometimes when it, excuse me, turns, the cauldrons get hung up. So it may end up being that the ghosts or the trim will have to be glued in there so that it doesn't fall out in the event of a cauldron going upside down. But we'll test that out and see. Also, if it looks like it's taking too much, I can always stuff some paper towel or something like that in the bottom so it doesn't use too much up. You can obviously use anything you want for the cauldrons. I thought about using cobwebs at first, but then since I'm using the ghosts, I thought that'd be too much white. So we'll see. So I pulled out some of the strands of twinkle trim, and then I'm just measuring to see about how far the ghosts can be in the cauldron, and then trimming them off using my clippers here. And then I'll stuff a little bit of the twinkle trim in here, and then put some ghosts. Originally, I was playing with using some paper clay to make some skeletons or mummies to ride in the cauldrons, but I thought that might be too heavy. So then I thought, oh, why not use some of Laura's great images? And I thought the ghosts would be perfect for that. So I'm just going to add a little more twinkle trim in here and see now. And then I can always come in here, and if pieces are hanging out too far, just give them a little haircut and try that out and see if when it turns they stay in there, or if they need some gluing action, or what the story is. So while it's drying, I'll probably just play with filling up those cauldrons and testing out to see how things stay in there. Oh, and I did want to say that I was able to pull up the supports a little bit and put a bead of glue at the base of each one, which I should have done to begin with, but just forgot. So now they're glued on the sides and on the base, so all the surfaces that can be glued are glued. Okay, I'll be back. Well, here's the completed zombie zipper. It was strong enough. There isn't any side-to-side wobble. I've got it here in the front view, which I was glad to see, because I really wanted to add a zombie element since it's called the zombie zipper. I named it that just because zombie started with a Z. Personally, zombies are a little too gory looking for me, so I debated about how to add a zombie element to this, and I'll have some close-up pictures. But what I did was down here on each side, I added a tombstone. These are from Alpha Stamps. They're some of the cutout ATC size tombstones. And then I have a plastic hand coming out of the front. I'll put this cardboard in front, and I think you can see it a little bit better now. Coming out of some moss in front of the tombstone, and I just put some cobwebs around it so that that would be the zombie element. You can see I've added the other collage elements to the zipper now. The title, I cropped a sign. I'll have in the notes which one it was. It had more than the beware on it, but I just used a photography program to crop out part of it, although you could crop the image in just about any application. And it does turn fine. Let me see if I can get my hand back here so that you can see it turn. Sometimes some of them get hung up just a little bit, but they eventually work themselves loose. So that's the zombie zipper. I hope you've enjoyed watching me put together, and if you're interested in trying it yourself, I have the step-by-step that I followed and the supplies listed on my blog. So happy Halloween!